I'm excited by this morning's topic. It's a topic that we at MK Think spend a lot of time thinking about. And we've seen a lot of change in the education world, primarily, starting with instruction, right? We're playing catch-up in the facilities world to a trend that's been happening for quite some time in terms of changing the nature of learning and what the nature of the teacher is and what we're expecting from our students. A lot of that comes from, what type of skills we're trying to teach the kids, right? So if you look at this old classroom, that was really sort of trying to teach kids to be compliant and have the skills necessary for that economy of the time. And, to a large degree, not much has changed in the classroom. I've been talking to a lot of you throughout the conference, and I've heard that there's some amazing things happening in each of your districts. But for the large part, if you look across the landscape of the United States, classrooms still look a lot like that classroom you see on the left. Not much has changed. So, we're trying in many different ways and different interventions to really get out of the way of the teacher more than anything. What can we do to support what they're doing instead of trying to get in the way of it by, just rigid environments? So it's really exciting to sort of hear about all the things that you guys are doing. A lot of it has to do with the fact that employers are demanding that the pipeline of folks that they're going to hire really have more critical thinking skills and are more active participants and active learners. And so, you can see that's, I think, a Google office. The offices look very different than they used to. I work in an open office. Sometimes it's maddening, right? You just want to have a place to go be alone. But the point is that everyone's collaborating, everyone's talking. You have a bunch of different environments to do different types of work. It's not all rote. So your day is challenging, and you're also really encouraged to interact with a lot of folks. So that's kind of the world that these kids are going into, and we're finally trying to create learning environments that really challenge that and support it. So I'm going to start out the discussion. I've asked the panelists to think about a couple of projects that they think really exemplify sort of the real new thinking in their district about how to really help model an environment around the instruction that they're trying to deliver. So first I wanted to ask them, why did you do these projects, right? So what were you trying to achieve? Did it have something about performance outcomes? Are you looking towards really changing socio-emotional equations? So that's going to be the first question I'm going to ask them to answer. And then also, let's look at the facility solutions. We've all seen a lot of great STEM environments and 21st century learning environments. We know a lot what they look like, but I think they're really important to review when you start really understanding what they were trying to achieve in there. Not all of them have the same solution. They shouldn't be. There's some foundational principles like flexibility, those types of things, but they're all trying to achieve different things. So I think that's one of the things I want to hear. And then I think from here, our questions really have to do about process, because a lot of times this is a big culture shift, certainly for teachers that have been teaching for 20 years in a system, and you're telling them, oh, let's promote collaboration, and you're now a facilitator, you're no longer a teacher. Well, that's not easy for a lot of folks. And so how did you actually do this at the school, and what types of steps did you have to take? How did you get into your bond program? I'm really interested in kind of having that discussion. And what lessons learned, right? Not all projects go great. We like to pretend they do, but I think the real magic comes from understanding what went well, what didn't go well, and how can we learn from it. So those are some of the other questions. And then I'd love to stop a little early so we can start getting some more questions. So maybe 10 minutes for dialogue. So that's... Brian, I'm going to have you go first. Well, you want to first start out just telling a little bit about your background so we can...
Well, the background of why we went after the aggressive design of the 2012 bond program has to do with wanting to have the best or the most unique portfolio of high schools, this is elementary, but of high schools in the country. And another thing that we wanted to do was have the uniqueness not only go into what the students actually walked into for a learning environment, but in the design process of how we engage the community with an individual architect on each project to ensure that we got not only the integrity of what the community had in it, but also what the actual programmatic theme of the school was, staying in line with ed specs as well. As you see here with Condit Elementary, not only is it a LEED design school, the architects did a wonderful job with it, but it has, I mean, learning spaces and common areas that are just interchangeable when you think about what a normal elementary school it looks like and what it's experienced for as students walk in and out of classrooms. You have kind of a college feel of the elementary building. And so one of the things that we tried to do here is to ensure that not only did we build something that would last for this current generation, but as the theme of what education looks like continues to change and, you know, idealize itself through what the current generation, future generation, and coming generations were, this building has the ability to be redesigned within itself.
Brian, just going back on that last project, how did you select the first project to really, you know, receive this type of new design thinking? Was it coming from the teachers itself, or where was the impetus for it?
I think it's just one of those all of the above. I think the design process, to me, is not one that I would say we would continue to use in the future in spite of its success, because you can be almost too inclusive. I think that's a lessons learned, but I think one of the positives from it is we did have teacher, we did have community, we did have alumni, we did have principal, we did have external factors that told us what type of school in the Bel Air neighborhood of Houston they wanted to see compared to the old building that they had. So from also, you know, looking at it from a glass half full perspective, after you finish the painstaking process of an all-inclusive design and feedback community involvement, you have what you see here. And I think at the end of the day, this is truly the goal, but I think it's a better way to do it. And I think you bring the experts, the SMEs into a room. I think you get teacher input. I think you understand what current pedagogy is for instruction in a classroom, and you integrate that into a design, regardless of the procurement method you're using, into a design that you're able to present to the community that says, this is what your campus will look like today and tomorrow.
And were there, it sounds like the teachers were a big part of the participation. Was it sort of old guard versus new in terms of who wanted to really bring in this type of environment? And are they using it as planned?
Well, not necessarily old guard versus new. We had what was called project advisory teams, but the operative word was advisory, because it's one of those things where it's a lot of people in the kitchen, but you only have one true cook. And I truly believe that those, again, can be successes, but give you a lot of opportunities for what you would do different. Whereas in our new portfolio of schools from Hurricane Harvey, we went with a prototype model, and we presented that to the community as this is the baseline of what educational facilities will look like in HISD. So it's worked a lot better, saves you a lot of money in soft costs, because having a particular architect for each project is probably not something my peers would agree that is the most, you know, money-worthy way to do it. But at the same time, the goal for the entire bond was to give the community what they voted for overwhelmingly, which is a unique project and a unique architectural experience per project for each community. And so it was really a community-driven bond program. Booker T. Washington High School, this is one of our oldest high schools in Houston. It's an engineering and science STEM high school, and it's more of an academy if you walk into it with the field. 25-foot ceilings and things of that nature. Common areas, again, similar to the college environment, similar to what you would walk into if you walked into one of the community colleges in your city, because you wanted those students not to have much of a building transition when you move from having the high school experience to the college experience. That's one. But then two, going to your earlier statements about current jobs and what the trades are looking for, you want them to get in-school training versus get out of school and have to have all of the hands-on. So these labs and flexible learning spaces support the engineering and STEM trades, but more importantly, you can bring in companies and organizations and put in mentorships and apprenticeship programs right there in the building with the equipment on site.
And was it in terms of, was it a specific population that you were trying to hit in terms of, educational STEM learning, or
Yes.
was career technical, or?
Yes, it was engineering and STEM.
Okay.
And that's one of the, going back to the design per community, design per architect, that's one of the keys about Booker T, is that it was totally STEM driven, totally engineering driven, because that's the feeder pattern theme. The middle school is the same way. It's STEM driven. The two elementaries are the same way. So feeding into the high school, we wanted them to come and get not consistent, but a totally higher level of learning when it came to the engineering and STEM experience for the craft trades. Finally, Energy Institute. It's truly, with Houston being the energy capital in some ways for the state as well as the United States, having an energy high school where you had touchscreen desktops and touchscreen workstations for students to engage in not only using 3D printers, makerspaces, learning spaces that are unique for working in that energy world. I mean, the collaboration and communication on how they utilize this equipment in comparison to what you would be doing going into an energy company day to day is almost, I wouldn't say one and the same, but very, very similar. And it had a lot of input, not from the community, because this is not a community-based high school. This had a lot of input from the energy companies who came in, the oil companies, the NRG, those companies came in, and they basically gave credence to what the design's intentions were if you are preparing someone to come out of this high school, go to college, and get into an energy-tracked career. And so those are what the classrooms are built around. Those are what, you don't have a normal auditorium. You have a kind of like a commons room where they don't have a lot of programs. They have a lot of presentations similar to this setup. If you walked into the Energy High School auditorium. You also have classrooms that give you the feel that you're in an energy lab. So you have, drop down uses of not only the burners, not only the certain pins that you would use on a 3D or graphics screen, but you have drop downs pretty much in every room for whatever type of craft trade you're working for. And then the other thing is you have interchangeable walls throughout the building so that if you're having more of a lecture hall style instruction, or if you're having more of an intimate style instruction with 20 to 30 students, you have that option as a teacher or as an auxiliary person coming in to present to the students.
A lot of folks looking at these spaces might say, wow, that looks really expensive.
Well, you look at it one way of, yes, that could be a thought, but the other side of that is, I think early on, as most of my peers would do as well, you set what your cost per square foot is going to be regardless of what you're building, and then you set your inflation as well as your ed-spec numbers around how you forecast you want to build this out. And I think there was a lot of scope creep in the beginning, but I think, the dirty word in what we do is value engineering. So obviously some things had to be cut out of the program, but that's where we had great donors to come in and say, you know what, you're building a $37 million building. I want to put X in the building because you're preparing employees, future employees, to come out of this building and come work for us. So there was a heavy investment from the energy companies in this school.
And they were coming to you for this, or were you going to them? Where was
No, this was all, I can't take any credit for this. This is all the principal of that building, building those relationships and building the hand-to-hand relationships through the foundations. And so she basically came to us and said, early on, I have a donor for this. Or I have people that want to donate, and we're like, who are the people? It's NRG, And so when you have certain scenarios where you have companies that foresight what the end result is going to be, or what their rebate off of their investment is going to be in human capital, it really does well to have a program like this in a school or in a building that's not necessarily a comprehensive high school or a neighborhood school, but also one that will give you something that all students from all neighborhoods can go to and get if they so choose.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. I'm Travis Palangi with Olathe Public Schools, just right outside of Kansas City. We're about 30,000 students And just kind of wanted to show this first slide out this morning of our actual question that we're going through right now as a district with our high schools and subsequently our middles and our elementaries. What you see on the right-hand side of the screen is our latest high school, 350,000 square feet. It's on year 2. Movable furniture. Typically, the desks aren't set up the way they are in these photos. They're moved around. Glass front, open. There's not necessarily a teaching wall. As you can see, the kids have put Post-it notes on the glass to show their fellow students as they're walking by kind of what they're doing in their classrooms. And then on the left is our oldest high school and the traditional setting that is still in. What drove us to what we currently have at our West High School was built off of student surveys and the social emotional aspect of it. And what we got back from the students was a lack of engagement that they felt with the teachers or the instructors. So we designed our high school based off that to get teachers out. Our latest high school doesn't have lockers. The teachers aren't necessarily in their classrooms. They have their own separate workspace where they get to collaborate and work together, but it gets them out open and being engaged with the students. And coming into year 2, we thought that was a great time to actually go back with the same survey and kind of see the results of where we were at. And it was a very shocking response that we got back. The students feel they're extremely engaged with the staff there now. They feel like they could go to any teacher. The social emotional aspect of it is for them really high. We're also going through at that same time doing an SOS survey, which is the signs of suicide. And our West High School is coming back with some very positive results on that.
Were they able to pinpoint it to the environment itself, or was it just sort of a general survey about happiness in their new high school?
No, some of the comments we got back was the built environment. The students like the flexible furniture. They like to come in and set it up the way that they want to set it up. And then they can also work with the teachers and work collaboratively to set up the space how they want to and kind of drive the curriculum. Mm-hmm. And the new high school is based off a project-based learning environment. It has the Makerspace, and we have a couple of programs that are specific to that high school, more of public safety and our green tech. But then the question comes back to is what do we do at our other high schools? We want to make sure the parity is probably what everyone else has to deal with as well. But does that involve the built environment? Does it involve tearing down walls, opening up the fronts, or is it a furniture-based solution? And currently that's the discussion that we're having right now. But then we also discuss, do we start at the elementary schools and work our way up? We would kind of hate to have the engagement of the students in kindergarten through 5th, mm-hmm. and then subsequently in middle schools, still be based off of a old desk and chair environment. Then all of a sudden they get to a high school and it's a little bit different. So that is the major question that we're now posed with. And it's not going to be a cheap solution. We understand that it's going to be expensive. But we feel in our district that we have the public that will back us up. We do our bond issues about every 3 years, anywhere between the $150 and $200 million range. But it'll be very heavily furniture-based and renovations. We are still growing. We will still need, the new builds, but we need to focus on our existing facilities. Now, opening a brand new high school, it's easy to set the environment with the staff as well. So it was easy to come in and tell them, this is the environment that we've created. We will give you all the professional development that you need to be successful. And we've set that standard at the new high school. Now, the other facilities with established teachers that have been in there, how will they react to this? And that is another discussion that we're currently having right now with our administration and how do we give these schools the tools that they need to make our students most successful as well.
So the move at the West High School, was that coming from the teachers? It sounds like it was more of a
That it was student, teacher, public, administration.
Because there was a real design process as part of that.
Exactly. We brought them in even before the project began. We knew we needed to build a new high school. We just went out and started just asking questions and making sure that we listened and making sure that we took the suggestions from the various stakeholders and developed it into what we feel is a very well used high school.
Any, in terms of learning so far, is it too soon to tell? But I mean, it sounds like you got some good feedback. But
we got some good feedback on the students and staff surveys. We're hopeful that when that first class comes out after 4 years, we'll be able to really see how that environment is working for them.
Are you tying it to sort of performance outcomes? Sort of, will we see if they've actually any relationship to testing or, performance on other levels?
Well, for us, we've got the standard testings that the state have to do, so we can definitely use that as a measuring stick. But I think for us is, once again, I always go back to the social emotional aspect for our students to make sure that when they leave our high schools that they feel like they got the best education possible.
Kiffany, would you give your background a little bit? Because I know you come from an education background, so.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Kiffany Lychock from the Boulder Valley School District. A little bit about my background. I was a classroom teacher for 10 years at the high school level. I taught Spanish to amazing kids in Highlands Ranch, Colorado for about 10 years. 5 of those 10 years, I was also an instructional coach in the building, and that's kind of where I began to understand I have a passion for teaching adults, almost as deep as my passion for teaching kids. And that passion led me into a number of different roles at the district level. So I was an educational technology specialist for Douglas County School District, which is on the south side of the Denver metro area, a professional development coordinator, and then their director of PD. When Boulder Valley passed our bond in 2014, they posted this director of educational innovation position. And the description of the job was supporting schools in implementing innovative learning environments and innovative teaching practices, which pretty much sounded like the best job ever. So I was very interested in that position and made the move to Boulder. This is my 4th year there in the same role as their Director of Educational Innovation. Tell you a little bit about my role in our bond and how we've really embraced this innovative learning environment process with our teachers and our leaders in the district. The 2014 bond that we passed was for $576 million, which is the largest bond ever passed in the state of Colorado. Much it sounds like you, Travis, we have a very supportive community of our schools, have a pretty good history of that support with our school district. With the passage of that bond, we knew we were going to build some new schools. So 4 new schools were part of that, 3 that were rebuild schools. So we built brand new buildings and tore the old ones down, and 1 new build in an area that has a lot of growth happening right now. With those schools, we were really focused on showing what was possible, thinking about what is the best possible learning environment for our students now, and then also moving forward into the future. So not just building school learning environments for today, but how could we try as best as we could to future-proof those moving forward. I imagine you guys probably experience the same thing when you build new schools. There's always a little bit of an equity question in who has the brand new learning environments, especially in a district like ours where we have a number of aging buildings. Part of the plan with the innovation funds in the bond was to then build the new buildings and also provide a bucket of funds for each of our other schools that wasn't being completely renovated. So the bulk of that money, the $576, is for deferred maintenance items, and then a small portion of that is really set aside for those innovation funds. So this idea of innovative learning environments is really touching every single one of our 57 schools in Boulder Valley. So the funds for our elementary schools are around $200,000. So each of our elementary schools has a bucket of $200,000. The middles have $400,000. Our K-8s have $600,000, and the high schools have $800,000. So it's scaled up basically depending on both the size and age of the kids. So that was sort of the impetus behind the bond and the thinking about what it might look like. Some of the photos that you see there are from some of our new builds. We engaged Fielding There International, who many of you may know a little bit about them, really focused on innovative learning design of schools. So we'll talk a little bit more about those schools. The learning community model was a really big change in terms of how we viewed instruction and how learning environments could really support all kinds of instruction and get out of the way of our teachers and what they were trying to do. That model is multi-age typically, as Fielding There designs. with more than one grade level, housed in a learning community that includes a suite of spaces for student and teacher use. So we have learning studios in our learning communities. Those are similar size to a classroom, but they typically connect by clear glass partitions that can be moved very quickly. Learning commons areas, which are those kind of soft touchdown spaces where kids can collaborate in larger or smaller groups. Small group learning rooms, and then we also have what we call in Boulder Valley flex studios. I believe Fielding calls them Da Vinci studios in most of their designs, but we call those our flex studios. And those are spaces for science labs, makerspaces, places where kids really learn by doing. The biggest change in that, the spaces were great. All of our teachers were on board with that idea and liked having the different kinds of spaces built into those rooms, but it was the collaborative teaching model that goes along with the learning community that was probably the biggest shift for us. So we put about a maximum of 150 kids across 2 grade levels in each of these learning communities and around 5 or 6 teachers, and those teachers are expected to co-plan and co-teach throughout the day to best meet students at their individual learning level needs. So that was a really big change. No one has their own classroom, all the spaces are shared, all the kids are also shared across those 6 teachers.
At what age do you start that model with them? Is it
Pre-K.
Pre-K, so they're kind of growing into this way of learning.
Growing into this way of learning.
And kids who aren't, when they meet in middle school, are you
We don't know
anticipating
yet.
Yeah.
We're only in year 2. It'll be interesting to see how that happens. With our middle schools, some of them work more on a middle school model. So still are collaborating. We have some humanities blocking that happens there. Not quite the same as what we have happening in the learning communities. And we have a variety of fidelity of implementation to that model across the schools. So I'll talk a little bit about that too and what that looks like. Really driving all of the work behind the learning community models are innovation guiding principles. I think our biggest takeaway, or the thing that I would say is most important in doing this work, is you have to really put instruction first. So instructionally, what is it that you're trying to accomplish with these new learning environments? Why are they going to help support you in teaching outcomes? So those are 6 big ideas around what we believe innovative teaching and learning should look like. So it should be founded in inquiry, it should foster a sense of curiosity and risk-taking, it should be a social process, you should be able to demonstrate mastery of your learning in multiple ways. Authentic learning is really most powerful for kids who are engaged in solving real problems, and that learning is personalized and learner-led. So those are sort of the big ideas that really guided our process and helped us come to instructionally what would that model look like. So the true learning community model, Meadowlark School, which is our K-8 school, it's the middle picture on that page, is a picture of one of the learning communities there. You can kind of see a commons area and through a couple of learning studios actually out to the other commons area on the other side. And that is a brand new school. So it's built in a new area. We hired a really amazing principal who's very much behind these ideas and believes strongly in those innovation guiding principles as being what's best for kids. And we were able to also hire staff in that building who strongly believe in the mission and vision of that school. A lot of support and training and project-based learning, thinking about social emotional learning and how do we best root that in our building there. And that school is a true model of what the learning community should look like. So they're paired in 2 grade levels there, pre-KK, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, all the way up through 8th grade. So it's learning community model there. Our rebuilds, as you guys might imagine, it's especially when you have schools that are performing at a high level. Most of our schools in Boulder Valley are very high performing. It's hard sometimes to see the incentive to change and do things differently when you've been in a place that does very well, that the community really loves, that teachers and the principals are really happy. So it's a different kind of change process when you do that there. So we have everything from grade level co-teaching that's happening in those buildings to some that kind of look like they did before they moved over. So those are all a little bit of a different kind of process when you're trying to support teachers who were excited about their new building only to learn that they were also going to have to change everything about how they teach in those spaces as well. So yeah, that's sort of our new buildings. I think the idea of having curiosity centers and heart spaces is another really big focus for those schools. So really large, open, welcoming gathering space. You can see some learning stairs at Creekside, which is that bottom, that would be your left picture. The curiosity centers, the new 21st century libraries, we call them the library on steroids. So books, print sources, along with everything digital that you can imagine or want available for kids to explore and be curious is sort of the function of those spaces. So
And how are you measuring success? So what does that look like what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, we're really thinking about that pretty deeply right now. We have a different model for the renovation projects. For these schools, we've just, our first really kind of in-depth survey around impact and where teachers are finding the model really supporting their teaching and learning most. That survey has just gone out, so we're expecting to see some results in the next 2 or 3 weeks to learn more deeply about that. As you guys can imagine, I'm sure you've seen this with new schools, the first year was by and large just trying to figure everything out. So we kind of just were in survival mode for that first year, getting everybody grounded, and now we're starting to do a little bit more digging into that. Our state also does a TEL survey with all of our teachers and leaders, and that's really about how you feel in your work environment, how the school supports you in your profession. So we'll use some of that data along with our student surveys, so similar to what Travis was inferring to, social emotionally, how welcome do students feel at school, how close do they feel to their teachers, and be able to do some learning from what we see back with those results there.
Right.
Yeah.
And were there any, like Brian was talking about, partnering with some outside, companies or folks who have a vested interest in sort of seeing and shaping these environments? Are you guys either doing that as well, re-seeking out those partnerships?
We have some strong community partnerships and learning throughout the district, but none in particular that are tied directly to these schools. Obviously we have our people who are involved deeply in the process, our architects and our vendors that really supported very strongly, but there's not really any specialization like a STEM school or an engineering school or things like that in these buildings. It's really supporting any kind of learning that aligns to those guiding principles of authentic, deep, students being inquirers and curious within the buildings.
So for us, in our 5 high schools, each one has what we call their 21st century programs. And we partner with Garmin, our local hospitals for each of the individual programs that we have at the high schools, ranging anywhere from our e-communication program to our civic leadership to, as I mentioned before, our green tech and our public safety. So we have a good relationship with the fire and emergency personnel that come in, and they actually want to use our high school as a substation, for example. So we welcome that. We kind of want to make these community spaces as well.
Yeah. Well, and a lot, Brian, I imagine the STEM spaces, equipment plays a big role, right? I mean, that's expensive, 3D printers, CNC machines, that kind of thing. So do you factor that into the bond, or is that through those partnerships that you kind of get that equipment?
No, we factor that through into the bond because you want to complete the actual learning space of its intended, experience with the right equipment so that you don't have to go and partner with a community college for them to go in and experience working with a 3D printer or working with a particular type of engineering machine or thing of that nature. So it was all part of the bond program and part of each project.
So in terms of a budget for something like that, I mean, we all have to factor in your FF&E budget. Are we looking at a 2X in FF&E budget or pretty much?
Well, I mean, for a $2 billion bond program, which is what we did, we had anywhere from 15 to 25% for not only the soft costs, but we built in individual FF&E budget, technology budget in each project, and then we had a cushion of what we call district-wide technology that would also be able to back up those as somewhat of a contingency without calling it that.
Let's talk a little bit about technology too, and maybe also you can draw on costs that you had with the FF&E. Did those go up for you?
Yes, actually they are, and we are budgeting for those because we've actually been engaged and out front, and our board is really receptive to it. They want us to actually invest into the furniture that we're doing. So we've got pilot programs in our elementaries and middle schools right now with furniture, working with the local vendors, making sure that we set up these classrooms correctly so that we can get the best feedback possible from the actual instructor and the teachers in the spaces. And they almost kind of look similar to some of the photos that were previously that were shown.
And what does that process look like too? Because a teacher doesn't know what they don't know about what's out there, right? How do you get that process of them understanding what's possible?
We actually come in and kind of walk them through why we selected the furniture that we did, and actually work with the vendors to give them the implementation and the data driven on why we wanted them to pilot this furniture. The vendors are really good about providing professional development on their equipment. And then actually the instructors are hearing it from their peers in other districts as well. So word of mouth goes a long way.
We, as part of the renovation projects, many of those include furniture as part of those purchases. And so we really involve the teachers a lot in those decisions through our vendors as part of that work. The other thing that we do to really help them think through the why behind these shifts is we have a project plan for each school where teachers think about the why behind wanting new classroom furniture. So if that's how you choose to invest your money, why is that? What would be the purpose behind that? And we actually ask them to set student learning outcomes and then have them measure those in the first year of implementation. So we have a professional learning structure that we call our innovation cohort that provides 4 days of support and planning for teams from each building to take a look at the outcomes that they've set for learning, whether it's around their new cafe space or their flexible furniture or their makerspace that they've created, and then return to us an impact story. So each of our schools that goes through the smaller renovation projects create a digital innovation story that answers that question of how is innovation shifting the story of learning in BVSD. It allows them to be very reflective in how those spaces are impacting learning. And for us, it's a great way to showcase to our taxpayers how their investment isn't just about things and shiny new spaces, but it's really, really, truly having an impact on kids and what they do in our district.
And has that been across, because we all confront teachers who've been there for 40 years and, you know, they're kind of looking at this saying, all right, I'll do it the way I do it. And they might have a setup that's 21st century learning, but they're doing 20th century instruction. How are you seeing that divide, and how do you actually, influence them and inspire them to kind of get on the bus?
Yeah, well, the cohort does a really nice job of that because there's a lot of peer inspiration that happens then when you put schools together in teams in a room and they get to have conversations. I would say, too, by and large, we think of these innovation projects as a catalyst, right, for shifting instruction. So changing the environment, we found in almost all of the cases with these projects, has really inspired people to think and teach in a different way. And by holding them also accountable to learning outcomes, it's been really helpful for us to see, you know, the impact of how much it actually can influence what they do in their teaching and how it impacts kids.
Well, I said I'd leave 10 minutes for dialogue, so we have exactly 8.5 minutes, but would love to open it up to discussions. Any questions for the panel? Well.
Booker T. Washington. It was just opened this past fall, so in August of this current year.
And do you have, for that high school, in terms of learning outcomes, or are you measuring that as well and trying to figure out?
Well, Booker T is one of those historic campuses that has systematically been a result of newer campuses around it being built. So the neighborhood students haven't been going to Booker T. Now they're coming back. So I think the measure there is right now strictly quantifiable in attendance growth, which all of our new campuses have had that. But then the second piece of it will be what type of attendance is coming back to grow it. Is it the STEM students or the GT students that were leaving to go to the Energy High School, the new DeBakey High School, the new Law Enforcement High School? So those are some of the things, when you're in a district like HISD that has school choice, you almost compete against yourself in a way. But at the same time, it can be themed as healthy competition, but it can also skew, I guess, if you were measuring growth and measuring quantification of a new building and student outcomes, you would have skewed numbers unless you, apples to apples, put zone students in that building to measure it.
Right. And how about the sort of when you have, is there another?
It's okay if you were continuing the conversation.
No, go for it.
I know it's a really sticky issue. I hear it from schools actually all over the world, like how to balance what teachers are comfortable doing and what they are eager to try with what we're able to do in facilities and what we want to push through facility innovation. And so, like, finding the balance between what teachers can sort of take on in terms of change and what we can do in our facilities. You talked about that a little bit, especially at Boulder Valley, but I'm wondering if all of our speakers could talk about, like, trying to find that that balance of innovating with your facilities and trying to work with teaching staff at the same time on those changes, it's an issue I hear all the time. I'd really like to hear a little bit more talk about that.
Yeah, I think for us, it's, of course, having this high school, our brand new high school just built, actually having professional development in that environment for the rest of our staff helps a lot, because they get to see their peers teaching in that environment. So that's been working for us. So it's a matter of then they go back into their classrooms and maybe try to do one or two little things to maybe kind of help with maybe what's coming. And then for us as a facilities director, then it's up to us to go in there and engage them and find out how, because each of our high schools are going to be different. The solution for one's not going to be the solution for the other. But as long as we get everybody engaged, which includes staff, I think they'll take ownership of it as well and hopefully produce a good outcome when we start that project.
I would start and say first and foremost, most teachers are amazing people who care deeply about their students. So if you can tap into how this will be better for kids and how this environment or whatever shift you're trying to make will really support kids, I think that's one way. A couple of the things that we found very concretely to be super successful and helpful for our staff is, I call it seeing is believing tours. So taking people to places where the model or whatever it is that you'd like to see happening more instructionally in your buildings is working, where kids are empowered and engaged and they can see that happening. So touring schools, taking people out to visit other places, I think was a really powerful thing that we saw work very well. And the other is the idea of teaming in cohorts across your district. So our new buildings, for example, did a version of Peter Elmore's instructional rounds. He's a Harvard professor. And that is basically, it's a protocol that helps teachers visit in teams. It's kind of based off of medical rounds, different learning environments, do some observations and collect some data around look-fors and things that particular school is hoping to see happening. And for us, getting our new schools together to be able to visit the different learning community models and see what was happening across our district was really, really powerful. So opportunities for them to see instruction, to work together in teacher groups, I think has been really important as well. I think as far ahead as you can get with the professional development ahead of time, the better off you'll be on the back end.
Is that professional development being teacher-led? Are they sort of taking charge of their own professional development, or is it outsiders
Not at
coming in?
first. Yeah, it was something that we led and designed. I think we were very, very cognizant of designing professional learning experiences, not just in spaces to have them experience it, but in a way that instructionally for teachers, we wanted to see them teach kids. So we didn't put them in desks and rows and talk at them, right? We had them experience and do learning in a way that we hope to see mirrored back in our classrooms again too. So whether that's through project-based learning, training, or we do a really good book study on Leaders of Their Own Learning by Ron Berger, which is all about student-led learning. So just finding ways that you can model learning experiences for adults that mirror what you hope to see in the classroom too, I think is really important.
What expectancies at a school? You're doing, let's say, design and then building it and budgeting. When the school was built in 1950, I don't know if there was a plan that in 78 years later.
I think for us right now, we're still trying to find what that range is. For our new high school, we were anticipating 10 years, but as you just said, we're not even sure if that's going to be the way the teaching model may be in 10 years. But for us, budgeting, yes, being actively engaged with the rest of the administration, letting them know that what you're seeing out in the industry right now, I wish we all could have a crystal ball and kind of see what it is going to be like in 10 years, but for us, we will start to budget for an uptick in furniture replacement.
Is the technology cycle faster when you're budgeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. For us, it is.
I would say we're really thinking through that budgeting for furniture replacement. It hasn't been something we've budgeted for in the past. We were actually just talking about this earlier. So yeah, it's definitely budgeting in that way. Technology replacement is one of the things that, kind of as a side note, I think will be really advantageous for us long term as we've replaced in the new schools and as we replace things district-wide as renovations. We're no longer installing projectors. It's all 4K high-def TVs, which I think cost efficiency is really important with those, and one of the reasons we went towards those, in addition to having higher definition, especially in our new builds that have a lot of natural light. You can see those screens a lot better without the glare. So that's just kind of an example of an efficiency standpoint that we're upgrading.
And the cost of those screens is going down and down and down.
Yeah, and we won't have to replace those as often as the projectors and the
You
bulbs.
get a great deal when you buy thousands of them.
Yeah, I think with components, yeah, we do plan the same. But I think living in education in the state of Texas, from a maintenance standpoint, when you have different factors of your M&O budget being predicated by local taxes, and you also have certain districts like HISD, which is a recapture district where we're paying back hundreds of millions to the state every year, it's hard. And I don't think you can sustainably plan on building renovation or building replacement within this bond. So I think you have to build and design with the mindset that for another 30 or 40 years, you may not be able to touch financially this building other than furniture, technology, and things of that nature.
Well, and I think part of this, the whole concept is learning anywhere, and outside is one of those places, certainly in climate weather. And what you don't see in a lot of bond budgets is landscaping, outdoor classroom budgets, and those types of things, and not to mention the M&O attached to that, right? So who's going to maintain those spaces? Who's going to champion those spaces? And I've seen a lot of folks with good intentions say, we have an outdoor classroom, and you see the next year that outdoor classroom looks pretty sad. Yeah. So, those are some of the things too. It's, well, if you want to learn everywhere, you have to really have a champion for all of those spaces that's going to use it for instruction.
Great.
Yeah.
So all of you were able to achieve these facility improvements through the passage of a significant bond issue. If you're in an environment where that probably isn't going to happen, did any of you prioritize this in case the bond would not have taken off, as to how you would have dealt with existing structures and the order of what spaces you would have renovated to achieve some of these outcomes if what you had hoped for just didn't take off?
Good question.
We did with our long-range facility master plan, looking 5 years down the road, because there really wasn't an emphasis on furniture replacement at that time. So last year, when we did ours, that was a big emphasis based off, once again, the new high school that was being built.
And we did ours similar to is on a 10-year master planning tool, but the comprehensive assessment that we did on our MEP and all of our kitchens and roofing units were done on everything except the 2012 bond project. So everything out of the 42, we did do that on. So if this bond had not passed, we probably wouldn't be using the general fund to renovate. We probably would have been replacing based upon mechanical failure as we go. Oh, definitely. We're not, definitely not.
Unfortunately, we did a facilities condition index assessment, and we're same, using the data to determine priorities within the bond.
Unfortunately, we are out of time this session, but I would like to thank Marijke, Travis, Kiffany, and Brian for joining us this morning for this very insightful and thoughtful discussion. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, guys.